Okay, so I was going to start because, everyone always says right off the bat, don't waste your vote on a third-party candidate. And as libertarians, we hear that all the time. So, but I thought it would, my audience is mostly in Alaska, and every 4 years in Alaska, Alaskans talk about the fact that they announce who the winner is before our polls even close.
Yeah.
So you could make a good argument that if you vote for a Republican or a Democrat in Alaska, you are wasting your vote because they've already decided by the time they count your vote.
That's very perceptive. And just yesterday, we filmed a new commercial that says that exactly. That if you're in a red or a blue state, it doesn't matter what you do. The outcome's already been predetermined. The dominant party is going to win. So how about not wasting your vote and voting for what you do want? So very good.
Yeah. And the word vote comes from a vow. It comes from the word vow. It means that what you're saying is true. So not voting your conscience is really problematic for your conscience.
Mm-hmm.
I would like
and also, can I just say,
Sure.
I like to give the practical explanation, which is, why would you want to vote for something you don't want? And when I ask people, do you think government is too big or do you think government is too small? When I ask them if they think government is too small, they usually laugh. So it's like, exactly. So why would you vote for even bigger government?
Yeah, it does seem so. It seems like we've gamified democracy to the point that no one's voting their conscience at all, and then we wonder why our beliefs don't get reflected in the system, but we're not voting for our beliefs. We're voting for a lesser evil. So.
Or the winner. I'm amazed at how many people just want to vote for the winner.
That is, it's like sports at that point, right? You just rob.
Oh, yeah. Well, and you know what? The Democrats and Republicans, they have gotten to be like sports. And in fact, my campaign manager would often talk about the red team versus the blue team, because we used to talk decades ago about how you've got, the Republicans want economic freedom and the Democrats want social freedom, but now they don't even want that. So it's not even a matter of, I want this party or this party because of their beliefs. Now it's just like literally the red team or the blue team.
Yeah, it is very strange. It's like Coke or Pepsi. Always makes me think of Coke or Pepsi. False duality. Well, right now, the world is in upheaval. It's a revolutionary time, and people are talking about police brutality with the same passion and vigor that libertarians have been talking about it for decades. So do you think that now is a time for there to be a liberty revival in this conversation? And are libertarians ready to point out to the world that we have already been on this page? We're there. We're waiting for everyone to get to that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, and let me interrupt myself by saying that when people ask me why I'm running for president, I say it's because government is too big, too bossy, too nosy, too intrusive. And worst of all, it usually hurts those they're trying to help. And if you look at the police, crime is a local issue, whether it's robbery, burglary, assault, anything like that is a local issue. So the police should be a local issue. And you should be able to, the police, the city council, the mayor, voters, property owners, they should be able to make their own decisions. But what happened is, and a lot of people don't realize this, and part of this is thanks to Joe Biden, which is the federal government comes along, they tax us, and then they buy tanks and grenade launchers, and they go to the local police department and they, dangle the free tank. Hey, would you like a free tank? And the police departments don't want to turn it down because, well, first of all, who turns down free, right? But secondly, they look at it as, well, our taxpayer dollars want to pay for it. So, we don't want Alabama getting that money. We don't want California getting that. So we'll take the free tank. So now you've got tanks and grenade launchers and free training from the government and additional money to buy more stuff. Now you've just militarized the police department. And so now you've got an us versus them mentality. And if you look at the sides of the police department, cars, you'll see, protect and serve and community and cares. And that's not really the attitude when you got a tank behind you. It just changes who they are. And just like I don't want to be at war with other countries, and I certainly don't want to be at war with my own citizens. And that's what we've got. And I'd like to mention one last point too, which is interesting, is if you were to ask people, okay, let's have a referendum. Would you like your tax dollars? Would you like a tax increase to maybe, renovate the high school or build a new park or whatever? Some people might say, yeah, the high school needs to be renovated. Other people might say, no, not worth the money. But here's a question. Imagine a referendum in which taxpayers were asked, would you agree to have your taxes go up so we can buy a tank for your police department? Probably most people would say, heavens no. I don't want you, I don't want to pay extra so we have a tank. And yet that's what's happening with the federal government. They are increasing the taxes, buying the tanks, and then giving it back to us, so we're getting what we don't want our money spent on.
Yeah, it's a conundrum.
It's the federal government being where it shouldn't be and making things worse.
And far too powerful, far too big. And it's been very interesting to see the cognitive dissonance coming from the left and the right these last few months. As on the left, they tell us police needs to be abolished entirely. It's this very hardline approach. But then the left is responsible for so many victimless crime laws that have fed into. How do you think I feel like the victimless crime laws coupled with qualified immunity creates this perfect storm of trouble, and it seems to manifest in inner cities where minorities are more represented in the population. It seems to affect poor people more, and it's really two problems, right?
Well, in addition to that, and everything you said is absolutely true. And in addition to that, if you look at prison sentences, if you look at drugs that people of color use, typically are more likely to use, like crack cocaine, they have longer prison sentences than drugs that whites more typically use. Right. And yes, you're right. They're policing the neighborhoods differently and everything else. And if we would get, that just adds to the us versus them. Imagine if alcohol prohibition were still around and people were looking around saying, okay, let's make sure that nobody's drinking a glass of gin. Again, that's such an us versus them mentality. So why do we have that with drugs? And it's just making matters much worse. Well,
and if memory serves me, organized crime came to power in the U.S. through prohibition. So
absolutely.
And another thing, they talk about how, for example, cannabis is stronger now. And they make that point as to why it ought not be legalized. But the reason we have such potent cannabis is because it was illegal, and it forced it into a horticultural closet where people, instead of growing fields of a ancient crop, now they've turned it into this, super powerful thing. So every time the government gets involved, they make everything they say they're trying to solve just a little worse.
Yes, and in fact, Milton Friedman, one of my favorite economists, Nobel Prize winning economist, he said that if it weren't for the drug laws, crack cocaine would have never been even invented, because economically it wouldn't make sense. If cocaine had been legal, it wouldn't make economic sense to even create something called crack cocaine. But because it was illegal, now that's what we get. And if you go back to prohibition, a lot of people who were drinking wine and beer, now they're using the harder liquor because it's easy to smuggle. It's less volume for the effect.
That's fascinating. And in each of those cases, we see clearly that the law made the problem worse.
Yep, exactly. So again, government too big, too bossy, too intrusive, and Herzog intends to help. So they think they're helping out people by having a drug law, and they're just making it worse. Oh, and last point, with the opioid epidemic, if marijuana had been legal, many of these people would have gone to marijuana to relieve their pain, and instead they're given a highly addictive drug that caused an even worse problem than marijuana ever could have. And in fact, the old joke goes, the only way you die from marijuana is if a bale of it falls on your head. So it's not even as dangerous as alcohol, which is legal.
Well, and we have legalized and regulated it here in the state. And I've always been for decriminalization as opposed to legalization. And it's become an industry here, but it's already, I mean, it's a very bureaucratic thing. It has a lot of problems. And I don't know that it has done what people thought it would do for anything.
Right. And I don't know as much about Alaska, but I've seen in California, there are still a lot of underground, back alley marijuana growers because the taxes are so high. So imagine if people were still making bathtub gin. Imagine if you went to the, corner drug dealer to buy gin because gin costs too much in the liquor store. And when you buy bathtub gin, guess what? You might go blind. So.
Yeah, real danger and it's all this unforeseen danger that I think a lot of voters, we're seeing it now manifesting with the police brutality, with all of these social issues. These are all things that government has made worse, not better.
Yep. And healthcare, the one issue, the one point I want to get across to every American voter is that we do not have a free market system. We hear politicians say, well, the free market didn't work in healthcare, so we have to go to single payer. No, we have not had a free market system since at least World War II. And so now we're going in the opposite direction. And when I hear politicians say Medicare for all, what I think of is VA hospital for all. We saw how well that monopoly worked. Why would you want another monopoly for the rest of us?
Well, and the regulations that we have on medicine, but have clearly driven the price up. And so now they want to come in and guarantee those high prices rather than let the free market bring those prices down. Mm-hmm. So it's
right.
Just
In fact, you may be aware of these stats, but the only two healthcare specialties which are somewhat free market are cosmetic surgery and LASIK surgery. And if you look at price, because insurance companies don't pay those, people pay with their own money. So that means doctors have to compete. And what's been going on is prices have been going down drastically and quality has been going up. So why can't we have that competition in the rest of healthcare? And by the way, and I don't mean to sound like I'm blaming the doctors, look at all the red tape they have to go through. The system that we have, it's obscene.
Yeah, I've talked to many doctors over the years about this issue, and they are all equally critical of the system as we are. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't hear a lot of apologetics. They know that it's broken. So, Well, how do you feel? This is kind of a change of subject, but it's a very important issue to Alaskans in particular. How do you feel about resource development? Are you pro-development, like oil and coal and natural gas?
I'm for whatever free market company would like to do, as long as they are doing it on their own and they are not creating a burden, such as an environmental burden, that the taxpayers have to clean up. So, I don't care if you're drilling for oil or you're grooming pets, cutting hair. It doesn't matter. You should be able to be in business as long as you are not, forcibly taking taxpayer dollars, as long as you are willing to trade with other people at a price that both of you agree with and not be protected by the government, not be subsidized by the government, and not be given special favors by the government.
That's the most rational approach. Here, it becomes a very political issue in Alaska.
Yeah.
And a lot of complexity.
Why is that? What happens?
Well, I think the biggest issue is that oil companies, we have all sorts of tax credits for oil companies. And there's people who are in favor of more of that. There's people who think we should give them none. The argument for it is that we have to be competitive as a state or they'll pull out. But what we've seen recently is an economic downturn, they'll pull out. It's not as, they go where the money goes regardless.
Well, my suggestion is to not have any corporate tax and allow people to come in and set up shop. We wonder why so many companies are setting up manufacturing plants around the world. Part of that has to do with our tax structure. So why do we want to punish business? Right.
It seems like we're holding them back rather, and I agree with you. We shouldn't be subsidizing it. There ought to be enough money in it, but if we're not hindering them either, what I'd really like to see as a state is for Alaska to have an agreement with the oil companies that they will hire Alaskans primarily. I understand that there's certain qualifications and whatnot, but a lot of people are flying in from out of state to take these jobs. So the biggest benefit, I think, to Alaskans is high-paying jobs with benefits.
Well, why are they flying people in?
I think they're big companies and they have lots of employees from all over. And I'm sure that they're going based on multiple reasons, multiple variables, probably qualifications being the number one. But also, big businesses like that, a lot of people scratch each other's backs. So I'm sure there's a lot of favors being done. But I don't know. I've never worked in the industry.
Yeah, well, I don't think the government should get in the way and, one way or the other. But I would suggest that a company would would be better off hiring somebody who's already there who could do the job than to pay for relocation costs.
Right.
So perhaps some of the jobs they're bringing in. But again, if we let business do this, because think about it, let's say an oil company does bring in their own employees. Well, those employees have to eat, they have to buy clothes, they go out to restaurants, they have to have daycare. So even if the other people aren't working for the oil company, now there's more business for them to go into whatever business they want to. So I would suggest that whatever intervention the government would have, it would, again, backfire in one way or the other, because that's what we've been having all along. Go back to healthcare. We are the only industrialized world on the planet who has healthcare tied to employment. And that's absurd. Why? We don't have car insurance tied to employment, so why healthcare? Well, the reason is because in World War II, around that era, companies wanted to hire better people. And so they wanted to give them raises. But the government had a wage and price freeze control. And so instead of paying them more, they said, we'll give them free benefits. We'll give them health care. And now we're in the system we're in because, once again, the government tried to fix a problem and they created a bigger problem than the one they tried to fix.
Go figure. Well, something that I was really passionate about was, and I supported Ron Paul when he ran as a Republican, but I supported him because he's so libertarian-minded. And I believe he ran as a libertarian in the 80s as president.
88, he was our presidential nominee.
And I just really admire his gentle demeanor, his perspectives, and he has such a way of, communicating liberty. But one thing that really I loved about his campaign was the End the Fed initiative. And I remember that being one of the most popular things about his campaign, but it seems like the Libertarian Party has pulled back a little bit on that issue. I'm not hearing a lot about that. How do you feel about that?
Well, let me ask you, why is that a big issue for you?
Well, I believe that a lot of the issues that we have when it comes to economic disparity has more to do with the devaluation of currency over time than it has to do with minimum wage laws. I believe that we don't build wealth, we create debt. So if we were a wealth building nation, if we were positively adding wealth to the economy rather than these banknotes that are just debt notes, then we wouldn't have to deal with inflation. So we wouldn't have to worry about raising the minimum wage because the value of our money would go up instead of down.
Right.
So to me, that is a truly foundational, fundamental principle that we've gotten off track with.
Yeah. But you can see how voters who are, and by the way, I don't disagree with you at all. And yes, I would like to first audit the Fed and then end the Fed. And to audit the Fed, I would ask Ron Paul for his recommendation of who to run it while we dismantle it. However, when we've got voters who are saying we can't afford our health care, how are we supposed to be able to pay our mortgage? We've got health care. Student debt is so high. A lot of times they just don't want to hear about the Fed, even though you make a good point. It's like instead of say, okay, healthcare, I'm going to help you this way. Instead, it's healthcare. Okay, here's a step. Here's Fed. So
way right.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I think for the libertarians who are versed in this stuff, we get it. But if you're trying to reach new people, it's just something they haven't invested time in yet.
Right, because a lot of people, libertarians by nature are we're interested in politics, we're interested in economics, and especially economics we're interested in. I don't think the average voter really cares that much about economics. They just want to be able to pay their mortgage, they want to take their family on vacation, they want their kids to go to a good school, and they don't look at it, like for us, politics is almost like a sporting event where we go in and we have major discussions. The average person, they don't want discussions on Keynesian or, Hayek or whoever. They just want to be able to take their family on vacation. They'd rather talk about, the latest football game or whatever than...
Well, and they tend to think of money as a measure of wealth, and it's hard to convince them that it's the exact opposite. It doesn't, doesn't immediately present itself as a clear thought. I think it's because it's deceptive by nature. So, but hopefully the listeners to this interview will look into it a little bit.
Yes. Well, Alaska has traditionally been very libertarian.
Oh, yes.
Our 1992 presidential candidate was from Alaska. And one of the reasons that he won the nomination is that he was an Alaskan state legislator, back when we only had a handful. So,
yeah, Alaska has a strong libertarian streak, even among those on the left and the right.
Yep.
There's a lot of that spirit.
A rugged individualism. Yep.
Yes, that's the phrase I've heard.
By the way, I would like to give you my website. You probably have it, but I know we're like 15 minutes over. But I would like to give you my website. It's joj2020.com. So I hope that your listeners here, and I hope that people who read your article are intrigued enough to check us out and to vote for me in the fall. And I'd like to mention that unlike most campaigns, we've had a lot of non-libertarian volunteers from the beginning. We've just been overwhelmed. So it's been great. So,
well, I really appreciate your time. I did want to wrap things up by pointing out that, and it's something you've pointed out and other people have pointed out, but we have two candidates that are both men with problematic experiences in how they treat women. One of which is straight up molesting women in front of cameras. Hundreds of times. It's crazy. I feel like there's a lot of people out there, not just women, but people who see that type of behavior and think that is just distasteful. Have you gotten a lot of feedback about the fact that you are a well-qualified, respectable female candidate that has great ideas? And is that a contrast that people are picking up on?
Oh, absolutely. And I have had a lot of people say that. And of course, we keep hearing in the media say, we've got two old rich white guys, not much different. Right. And I visited Knoxville, Tennessee yesterday, and I was so excited to walk into the restaurant, and there were 3 women who looked at me and they smiled as though they were my friend. And I thought, well, they must be mistaking me for someone else. And after I sat down, the owner of the restaurant came over and said, well, those 3 women recognized you. They know you're running for president. Would you mind going over and talking to them? And I thought, wow. And 2 of them were former Republicans and 1 a Democrat. And they were both basically saying what you were saying. And one of them was saying, yeah, I keep telling my husband, I keep sending him all the Facebook stuff saying, you need to check her out. You need to check her out. So we are getting the message out there, which is really exciting.
Well, I'm glad we can be a part of helping you do that.
Yes, thank you so much. Especially Alaska, again, traditionally libertarian roots. So,
well, I hope that a lot of local people here in Alaska realize that the vote is already counted. By the time it gets to us anyway, why not add some viability and validity to a third-party run for a great candidate like yourself? Honestly, of the libertarian candidates in the last several cycles, you are a refreshing breath of fresh air. I mean,
well, thank you so much.
But sometimes the libertarians put out some, some edgy people. And I like that you're a well-rounded person and even-keeled. I love the fact that you're a psychologist. So I'm sure that's a conversation we could do another 15 minutes on.
Yeah. But, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you for spreading the word. That's what we need.
Thank you, Dr. Jorgensen.